Hi, so the single biggest question I've gotten since I introduced the good old start with a theme, create characters who represent different perspectives on that theme model has been, what if I'm starting with a character? And my answer historically has just been tough titties. But then I went and got myself into that very pickle. I plucked a character from an old story of mine and tried to work him into a completely different one because I was attached and I didn't want him to go to waste. His name was Leon and he was the chief security officer of a post-apocalyptic city. He was a supporting character who embodied the humanity must survive no matter the cost mindset. He also had an extremely memorable personality and aesthetic. He was so easy to write dialogue for, I could hear it. Imagine like a hybrid of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Rust from True Detective, but all wrapped up in this weird statesman-like demeanor. I'm not doing it justice. But my point is, to integrate him into my new story, I found that I had to divide his existing attributes into two categories. Purpose, basically his function, thematically speaking within the original story, what he represented, and personality, all of his quirks, the way he speaks and looks and feels, his temperament. What I realized was that I wasn't attached to his purpose, I was attached to his personality, the characteristics that make him lifelike. I found a suitable role for him in my new story, which has its own thematic framework, and I grafted all of that personality onto the new role. While he is doing a completely different thing now, it's like he never left. But there's a good chance this isn't your situation. There's a good chance your situation is really cool character, lifelike and vivid, who never had anything to do. Still though, you want to start with this same exercise just to clear your head. The only things that should go in the purpose column are your character's deepest beliefs. Don't fill that column with likes or dislikes or demographic factors or sad, happy, angry, none of that. I'm counting all of that as personality. The purpose column is for what your character believes. But depression is at the core of my character. Can't I put depression in the purpose column? Well, is depression a belief? Can you recontextualize depression as a belief? How about instead of saying depressed, write believes there is no hope in life? Now instead of an attribute, you have a perspective, a belief that can be weighed against other beliefs and tested by the plot. If your character has no beliefs, make some up. This step cannot be skipped. After you have a clear understanding of what your character believes, turn that belief into your theme. And now you have the first two steps of the method. You can't even tell which order they were done in. The next question, the question at the heart of plot generation is, what is a situation that will test this belief? And then that situation becomes the plot. It's important to remember that your character could have a number of foundational beliefs. This plot doesn't have to challenge all of them. Honestly, it's better if you just hone in on one. That one priority, that central thing you want your story to be about. The personality's still there, still chillin', we'll add it in later, but we gotta nail this plot down first. Instead of talking about this like it's a feature film or a story with a definitive beginning, middle, and end, let's think of it more like an episodic TV series. Pause, here's a little vocabulary. Serialized TV is when you have to watch the episodes in order because each one flows into the next, and they have an overarching plot. Episodic TV is when each episode gets to be its own thing, a new contained adventure every time. While there might be the occasional multi-episode arc, the show can generally be viewed out of order. Any given episode puts the characters in a new situation, and we get to see how they respond to that situation. Maybe it changes them, maybe it changes our perspective of them, maybe it's just interesting, I don't know. What I do know is that Doctor Who is excellent at this, so I'm going to do that thing where I talk about an IP for just long enough to put it on the thumbnail. Doctor Who is a show that should give you a headache, but doesn't. At its best, it will present the most absurd, the most corny, the most visually and tonally clunky premise imaginable, and then somehow wring deeply meaningful character moments out of it. For instance, imagine a protagonist who has learned to see everything through a scientific lens, a character who believes everything must have a rational explanation. I'd like to write an episode where I single out that belief and challenge it. How? Maybe present him with something that defies scientific understanding. Present him with a situation that requires him to act on faith alone. You know, like maybe he goes to a church and makes some psych. He crashes on an asteroid with Rose and it's right next to a black hole, but it's not getting sucked in because the asteroid is actually a prison for a 300-foot tall CGI Satan whose mind is possessing crew members and giving them tattoos, and so the doctor has to go into a giant hole. There are also squid motherfuckers with find Satan and realizes that the asteroid destroys the pot, and he realizes that he has blind faith, knows that she'll escape. Wait, why am I tearing up? Look, the point I'm trying to make is that if your biggest priority is just to spend time with the character, an episodic approach might be just what you're looking for. Good episodic storytelling starts with character, finds themes within the character, and then builds a plot out of those themes. The thing is, since you get an infinite supply of plots, you have a lot more freedom to play with those themes. To a serialized content writer, I would prescribe maximum efficiency. But the game is a bit different for episodic shows. Once you find the core of your episode, the heartstring you're going to pull on to make it meaningful, you can kind of just do whatever. I mean, you can extrapolate those themes into the most elaborate, wacky plots imaginable, and nobody's going to get mad at you because they came for the characters. That's the unspoken contract between episodic creators and episodic consumers. I will watch because I enjoy spending time with these characters. And as long as these characters are being utilized in faithful and dynamic ways, I will keep tuning back in. But for serialized content, the contract is this better be headed towards a meaningful climax. And again, you can have a little bit of both on an episode-to-episode basis. Multi-episode arcs, continuity, sure. But fundamentally, there are two types of shows. The ones that end and the ones that get canceled. If you go episodic, you can just play with your characters until the meta cuts you off. The meta being money, viewer fatigue, production complications, or some other real-world factor. But if you go serial, you're committing to having an ending. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Even Doctor Who, for all of its intermittent climaxes, has never come out and declared this is the last one, because there is no last one. And the show has built-in mechanics to ensure that it keeps chugging along, and I love that. Some of my favorite stories are episodic. Adventure Time, for instance, was instrumental to my journey as a writer. I mentioned this in the Q&A, but one of the first things I remember writing was an episode of Adventure Time. And no, I still won't call it a fanfic because my underlying intention was to bring it to Cartoon Network and get it made. It was about Finn having an evil clone who comes from space or something, and there was a lot of sword fighting because I was in my sword phase. Anyway, my point is I love this show. I can admire a story that meanders on purpose. But as a writer and as a writing coach, I just have to think of it a little differently. And my conclusion is that if your goal is just to spend time with a character you created, episodic is the way. And episodic doesn't mean the story lacks depth. Doctor Who and Adventure Time dig so deep. Episodic just means there's no momentum towards an ending, which eliminates the concept of filler. Even Adventure Time's final episode doesn't claim to be the ultimate outpoint. It has a showdown with a godlike villain, but after that, the show settles back into episodic mode and reminds the audience that this universe extends out forever, and these characters are going to keep being their goofy selves even if we're not watching. This is a cancellation type ending, but that doesn't mean it isn't graceful and meaningful. Episodic stories and serialized ones can both work equally well. All it takes is a clear understanding of that distinction and a definitive choice as to which one you're going with. If you're collaborating with someone else, have that conversation, please. 2 years ago, I was working on a story that involved a character who belonged to my creative partner, and this character in my partner's mind had fundamental traits and beliefs. So I would pitch a scene involving this character and my partner would be like, well, he wouldn't do that. It's against his morals. Well, yeah, but at this point in the story, he isn't there yet. He's a much darker character, and then he eventually becomes the character you envisioned. And that back and forth persisted for months because we were not addressing the real difference in our respective approaches with this character. So if you heard all of my episodic praise and you're still like, nope, I want my character to be part of a story with a beginning, middle, and end. I want them to grow and change. I am going super duper serial. Ask yourself this one essential question. At what point in the story does your character occupy their original form? If you want to give your character an arc, you have to figure out if the version of that character you have now is post-arc, pre-arc, or mid-arc. You have to place this character on a timeline, and no matter where you place them, you're going to be forced to spend whole scenes, maybe even whole acts, with a version of this character that you're unfamiliar with, because that's how arcs work. Now, there's another important distinction I want to cover, which is how to create a functional plot for a group of pre-existing characters. Let's say you're starting with 3 characters, Glingus, Twingus, and...
Put your hands up
my God,
now!
Oh my God. All right, okay.
Hands up.
Okay.
You and me, we're gonna have a little talk.
I'm sorry, I can't seem to place you. No offense.
1 minute my boyfriend is about to tell me he loves me, and then he just starts speaking in tongues, the universe around me collapses, and I wake up in
Ohio?
You're gonna send me back to Philip, and you're gonna fix this. This is your fault.
This isn't gonna be easy to hear, but he's literally written to not love you.
Well, he does.
I wrote him to not love you.
And now, you have a gun to your head. Did you write that too?
You were gonna spend the rest of your life stuck in that moment, lying to yourself. Now you don't have to.
Send me back.
Kima.
Tell them about
Hi, do you wish that you wish you had skills? Well, you gotta check out the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. I got a little secret for you, don't take it the wrong way, but college degrees don't really matter in the creative world. If I want to see whether or not you can paint, I'm going to look at your paintings. Shocker. So the question is, can you obtain professional painting skills and not spend tens of thousands of dollars on a fine arts degree? And the answer is no. Just kidding, yes you can. Acrylic painting, learn the basics for beginners by Lorian Gonzalez. And it's so much bigger than painting. Obviously, on Skillshare you can find specialized courses on just about anything. Personal projects to build your portfolio and get the gigs you want. A playlist of top professional advice. I need this stuff if I want to build my brand and keep my money under control. And the platform as a whole represents a refreshing alternative to education as we know it. Injecting growth into your work-life balance can be tough when that growth is coming from a heavily structured educational machine that demands you set an arbitrarily high bar for yourself. But at Skillshare, no goal is too small. For a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, click the link in my description. Oh, you're still here.
Yeah. Well, we don't have Skillshare in my universe, and it actually sounds pretty cool. And maybe I got some other stuff to think about. I'll see ya.
You think that was insane? You should see what I did to Matthew. Anyways, you have these 3 characters, you created them all for fun, they've been living in your brain for years, and now you want to put them in a story. This exercise is basically going to be a more advanced version of everything I've been talking about in this video. Glingus, Twingus, and the other guy all need to be divided up into purpose and personality, or belief versus everything else. Glingus's core belief is that the space war is bad and needs to end. Twingus's core belief is that protecting your family comes first. And the other guy's belief is that Space God is real and he will save us. Glad we cleared that up. Ready to move on? Just kidding, this sucks. My method involves giving characters in a story perspectives on a single theme. But each of these characters is dealing with their own theme. So if you were doing my method, you'd need to create a supporting cast around each of these 3 principal characters. Twingus would need a supporting character just for Twingus, who doesn't see the value of family, and so on and so forth. And then you don't really have one story anymore, you have 3. But hold on, what if you could arrange the beliefs so that each character has a different orientation on each of the 3 themes? Space God, family, and the ethics of war. So Glingus is anti-war, Twingus loves war, and Oi thinks war is a necessary evil. Twingus puts his family first, Glingus thinks family is second to the mission, and Oi never had a family or something? I don't know. Finally, Oi has faith in Space God, Glingus is an atheist, and Twingus believes in Space God, but doesn't think he'll be of any use. This might seem clever, but it's messy and heavy, and it was really annoying to write and say, and when you try to create a plot to accommodate these themes and introduce moral quandaries relating to them, you're gonna have a hard time. One theme is better in my experience, and you might have to fundamentally change some of your characters to make them work for that one theme. And when you drag your personalities back on, you might find other contradictions in the characters. Honestly, it's just really hard creating a cohesive story from a grab bag of fully formed but disparate elements. The willingness to kill your darlings, as they say, might be crucial here. If I were you, I would be prepared for that. But once again, I recommend the episodic format, namely because you can have an episode focused on one particular character without the other characters needing to justify their existence. You can literally just leave them at home. If you're writing a Glingus episode, you can just focus on Glingus. Since the episode is about Glingus's relationship with his father, you bring in Twingus for one scene, because Twingus also has an interesting relationship with his father. So Twingus can just say his piece and leave instead of just hanging around. I'm tired of saying these ridiculous names, so I'm going to talk about Adventure Time. Puhoy is top 5. The episode starts with Finn expressing what could be described as some mild to moderate anxious attachment patterning concerning his relationship with one flame princess, his so-called girlfriend.
She hands me her cell phone!
And the theme of this episode is attachment. Its 11 minutes of runtime are solely devoted to exploring that theme. We initially get both of our leads' perspectives on it. Finn is all tied up in knots because, look, I could spend hours talking about attachment theory, but the gist of it is that he's obsessing over innocuous things like whether or not his girlfriend laughed at a joke and letting those observations fester into a fear that she'll leave him. An irrational fear, I might add, that we think stems from inconsistent nurturing during the formative years of childhood. Anyway, Jake's rebuttal to Finn's anxiety is this.
You see this cup? This is literally my favorite cup. Huh.
Which is really great characterization, but it gets better. Because while Finn is trapped in the pillow world, living an entire lifetime with his pillow family, subconsciously learning how to put his worries into perspective and overcoming his anxious attachment, we get some brief cutaways to Jake which give us a simple but absolutely brilliant deconstruction of his perspective. The first one shows Jake retrieving the mug that he previously claimed was out of sight and out of mind. When BMO points out the contradiction, he awkwardly ignores it. That's the whole cutaway, it's like 15 seconds. To me, it shows that he does have some sentimentality, but that he'd prefer not to. Interesting. But then in the final cutaway, we learn why. He discloses to BMO that he never got a chance to get attached to his own kids because their half-Rainicorn genetics caused them to mature immediately and go off to live their own lives. And he doesn't cry or go on some emotional tangent, he just makes a face, and then the cutaway ends. Another tiny 15-second thing. And I keep bringing up the length to stress that these didn't need to be there. Like, they're nice little act breaks to divide up the A-plot, but the last one especially proves to me that this was deliberate. Because it comes out of nowhere, it's not even tied to the mug argument. But there's also a cutaway in between those two that doesn't seem to be about Jake at all. It shows BMO putting a wig on the mug and acting like it's a person, which is cool because if you're dealing with the theme of attachment, why exclude a character who might have a third perspective? BMO personifies stuff all the time. You could argue he has a loose grasp on the concept of sentience, but then again, he is a robot. One minute the mug is BMO's friend, but then when Jake comes and takes it, BMO doesn't seem to care. And this is the least important of the three perspectives expressed in the episode. It's not really a perspective that can be applied to the relationships Finn and Jake are struggling with. It's just a fun window into how the goofy little robot character sees attachments. Again, laser focusing on that theme. What does each character have to contribute? In Finn's case, a lot, but if the episode were about a theme more relevant to Jake, their roles would be switched. And there would be no pressure to give Finn something to do because of the episodic format. He would just be allowed to offer whatever relevant input he had and otherwise chillax. And I want to clarify that characters can grow and change in an episodic story. They just shouldn't be growing and changing on a trajectory that requires an ending to be meaningful. This is the model I use. Is it the only model? No, obviously. But since I evidently have to spell it out in crayon for some people, the video's over by the way, I am aware that there is no inherently correct way to write stories. I get a comment every so often that goes like, actually art is subjective, and that statement is true. But you know what it's not? It's not fucking helpful. Like, imagine if you were writing a novel and you paid an editor to comb through your entire manuscript and they handed it back to you and the only note was, "No wrong answers, follow your heart, lol." Would you gain anything from that? Of course not. If you honestly think screenwriting can be approached in the same manner as interpretive dance, I have reason to suspect you haven't attempted either, but go ahead. Open up that document and let no wrong answers be your guiding light. I think you'll quickly find, as I did, that subjectivity cannot be wielded offensively. It can only be wielded defensively. As far as I'm concerned, it serves no purpose beyond deflecting criticism, so I don't worry about it. I'd rather construct theories and translate them into practical skills. If you're into that, consider subscribing to my channel. And if you're not into that, consider subscribing ironically. My Patreon community has doubled since the last video, and at this point it would feel disingenuous to pad out my runtime with 3 minutes of names, so here's the gang in scrolly format. I can't thank you guys enough, really. I'm almost at the point where I can fully support myself through this venture, and a lot of that comes down to your generosity. Writing consultations are back open. The document is linked. If you don't see any slots open, it's because I'm fully booked. You're too late. The jeans are already ironed, boy. The turkey's already in the oven. The yogurt's already in the parfait, bud. Please do not scroll all the way to 2027 and send me an email telling me my calendar is broken. It's not. This block only goes through July. I'm not going to schedule meetings years in advance, and I'm also not going to be a beta reader for your novel because I can't read. I am kind of curious, though, about what sorts of writing problems I should tackle next on this channel. If you have any ideas, let me know, either in the comments or through the silly little telephone we made out of 2 cups and a string.